My name is Harraj, and I'm a sales rep for a telecom company in the north of England. On that particular day, I was expected in London for a meeting with some business executives. From my house, I phoned a taxi and waited outside. After a while, the taxi pulled up and horned impatiently, even though I had acknowledged his arrival. I told the driver I wanted to go to the airport, and because it's quite a drive, I made myself comfortable. I took out my iPod, and to my surprise, I discovered the taxi had a sound system which actually allowed me to plug in my iPod and listen to the music through the taxi speakers. I'm a real fan of Led Zeppelin, The Clash, real music, not the kind you get nowadays. While the taxi was making its way through the morning traffic, I was listening to London Calling and sang along with the refrain.
London calling to the faraway town. Now war is declared and battle come down. London calling.
Having arrived at the airport, I paid the rather strange acting and not very talkative cabbie and made my way to the check-in counters. Since 9/11, I always find myself extremely self-conscious when entering an airport. I guess it's because of my Pakistani background and the fact that we are being watched more closely than others. Yet instead of having adopted a more defiant attitude, I try to look as innocent as possible, which, of course, is impossible and makes me even more suspicious. While waiting for my flight, I browsed the kiosks and drank some coffee at one of the small bars. Afterwards, I walked around a bit and observed the other travelers. I took a seat near the gate and stood in line when my section was asked to board the plane. A woman was already sitting in seat 21B, so I had to ask her to get up to let me reach 21A. I remember her acting a little annoyed when I accidentally touched her elbow. We didn't look each other in the eyes. Instead, I closely studied the safety regulations. It was only a few seconds after the plane had moved away from the gate when it came to a sudden halt. As if the pilot had realized he had forgotten to look into his rearview mirror and had slammed the brakes as a precaution. It was then that the pilot introduced himself over the intercom and told us that we were going back to the gate due to technical problems. He didn't come across as very convincing, and I remember my fellow passengers being a little agitated, even fearful. I kept looking outside, hoping I could find out why we had to return to the gate. But I was also afraid to turn around because I felt people were staring at me. The flight attendants were not paying attention to the passengers, but were agitated themselves. They were running up and down the aisles, and they refused to comment on what the captain had just said. As soon as the doors opened, several heavily armed policemen entered the plane. They came running towards us, and to my shock and amazement, they took hold of me and escorted me out of the plane. I barely had time to collect my stuff, and looking back on the whole episode, I still can't figure out how I got past the woman sitting next to me. I was ushered into an interview room. At first, nobody asked me any questions. Policemen came and left and generally looked rather seriously at me. After about half an hour, a middle-aged officer came and sat down. He told me I was arrested because a taxi driver had alarmed airport security, who in turn informed the authorities. The driver had actually followed me into the terminal all the way to the check-in counter and had then alerted airport security. It appeared he thought me singing London Calling by The Clash out loud was enough reason to consider me a threat to society. They simply released me after 3 hours of interrogation. My friends think I'm an idiot for not starting litigation against the police, but I'm just not that kind of person. The taxi driver didn't like Led Zeppelin or The Clash, but I don't think there was any need to tell the police.